Good Vibrations.
Now, that would be my view entirely, but let's watch what Ice-T, the rapper, said yesterday about his interpretation of the Second Amendment.
The right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny, not to hunt. It's to protect yourself from the police.
Welcome to Good Vibrations 124. This show is likely to be a controversial and contentious one. It will probably offend a few people. So it's just as well I've got the right man for the job as my guest today. He's no stranger to contentious issues. It's welcome back to Mark Passio of whatonearthishappening.com.
Mark, thank you so much for inviting me onto the show today. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think you were last on the show about 4 years ago, so it's certainly good to connect again. I was with you last month in Phoenix. We were both out there for the Truth Mind Reality Conference put on by our mutual friend Ivan, and that was a great event. I just wondered if you wanted to say a few words about that and touch on it just to kick things off.
Absolutely. One of the best conferences I have ever attended. Ivan and all of the organizers on his organizational team for the event did a outstanding job of not only booking some of the best speakers on some of the best topics that are so pertinent to today's world, but they really organized the event right and treated the speakers right, and it went off without a hitch. It was just done correctly as far as I'm concerned, as far as a conference is concerned. Definitely one of the best events that I've been to, and if anybody out in the listening audience has an opportunity to check out future Truth Mind Reality events, should there be any, there's no confirmation that there's going to be more, but I'm assuming that since it was such a success, the first one, that Ivan's probably going to be doing more in the future. If anybody has an opportunity, I would highly recommend the event to anyone.
Sure. And some good social elements built in as well. We all went out for a picnic-type buffet thing on the Sunday in a park, which was a great opportunity to network and kick some ideas around. So, yeah, as you say, it was all done the right way. Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume that people know about your background then, in terms of my listeners. If they don't, they can go and look up your past. I'm not going to get you to run through all that again, that painful process. But I'm sure people are familiar with your work for the most part.
Sure.
So we're going to get into the main subject today as we progress. Just before that, though, I just wanted to cover something that's particularly topical at the moment, which is the current situation we have with Syria. And right on cue, this happened just a few days ago, where military strikes have been ordered by both our countries. And the timing of this event is of no surprise when you understand who's really in charge of world affairs and the belief systems that they operate to. And you made a Facebook post on the 18th of March warning people to not be surprised if something major goes off during April. And sure enough, on Friday the 13th, there it was. Do you just want to explain the occult significance of this date period that we're now in to those who make these kind of things happen?
Sure. This goes to one of the main themes of my work, and that is that the people who are following world affairs often do not understand that there is an occult element that is operating behind the scenes. They still believe that this is just financial and political machinations. They believe that these are the only elements that really ultimately affect what is going on, what's going on in the world of politics and what's going on in the world of finance. And they do not understand that behind those two worlds that are shown to the public, there is an occult world that is controlling things from behind the scenes. And these occultists have very peculiar and particular belief systems that they follow very rigidly. They don't deviate from their belief systems any more than any other religionist deviates from their belief systems. And they have a belief system, oddly enough as it would seem, that is about the necessity to continue to sacrifice human beings to the sun and to the earth. Now, this sounds like an ancient, ridiculous sun-worshipping, blood sacrifice ritualistic belief. And it is. These people believe that on a yearly basis, There has to be human sacrifice done to actually shed blood, and the energy that is within blood must be given by human beings to the earth and the sun so that the cycle of life can continue. And they believe if they don't do this, that something horrific, more horrific than the human sacrifice that they do, will happen. Now, obviously, this isn't true. Obviously, I don't believe this, but I'm trying to explain to people what they believe. Okay? That's what religion is. This is the other thing we have to understand that we're dealing with. Religion is a set of nonsensical beliefs that are not true, that don't do anything good for anybody, and all they do is control people's mentality. They control the mind. Okay? And people believe in what is not true rigidly and don't want to accept anything that conflicts with that pre-existing belief system. That's what religion is. That's why government is a religion, because people believe in an idea that isn't true, namely authority, that some people have authority over others, and they rigidly attach to that idea, and they will not accept anything that conflicts with that belief. Okay? So that's a religion. Money is a religion. As we're going to talk about later, carnism is a religion. There's so many religions that we don't even think of as religion because we think of just the cultural religions as religion. But to go back to this notion of the season of sacrifice, these occultists who are really in control in all of the institutions in our world have this belief system and they act upon it. See, it doesn't have to make sense to the average person. It doesn't. No one else has to believe in it. People go, well, that can't be true because I don't believe in that. You know, that doesn't affect me. Other people's religious belief systems can affect you whether you believe in them or not. You're not required to believe in them.
Yeah, like okay? your opinion is the arbiter of all truth everywhere.
Yeah, and world events. In other words, like radical Muslims or radical Christians can't do something negative in our society that impacts us. Okay, if a radical Islamists, if a group of radical Islamists explode a bomb, you're not required to believe what they believe or the reasons that they felt that act was necessary for it to affect you. It has an effect in the real world,
right?
Because they're acting on the belief. So here's what they do almost on a yearly basis. It's very rare where they even skip a year of doing this. And if you are paying attention, if you're actually open-minded that other people have sick, depraved beliefs and they're actually in control and have the ability to pull off these acts, then you will notice the pattern historically. You can go back and research in the past of how these events have happened during this time period, and you could pay attention in the future, and you'll see that what I'm saying is true. See, I'm not a prophet, and I'm not psychic, Mark. I don't have psychic powers, okay? It would be a nice thing if we could totally predict the future, but, I 100% predicted this event in Syria. I knew something was coming that was going to be a massive death event,
right?
Okay? And I called it within this time period. So, and the reason I was able to do that is not because I am psychic or have any magical powers. The reason I was able to do that is because I know who's in control and I know what their belief system is because I worked with them in the past and was a member at a very, 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 very low level of their little cult, of their big worldwide cult is more like it.
Right.
But once you understand their mindset, you can actually predict their behavior because they don't deviate from their belief system. They're very regimented and almost reptilian-like in the fact that they will continue to do the same repetitious things over and over again. And there's a reason for that. They have no reason to deviate from it. The public is still dumb and unaware. The public is not paying attention. The public is not open-minded to understanding their belief system and their religion. And therefore, it continues to work. So there's no reason to deviate from their existing methodology. Okay, so here's what they do. There's a 40-day time period at the beginning of spring. It goes from March 22nd, 322, a big significant date in the world of the occult, for 40 days, starting at that date, to May 1st, which is the highest holiday of the occult season. It is the major Sabbath of the 4 main Sabbaths of the occult year. Okay? That's the midpoint of spring, May 1st, known as Walpurgisnacht, or May Day. Okay?
Right.
It is the highest dark occult holiday of the year, the holiday of Satanism and dark Luciferianism. It is the highest holiday of communism, and it is the highest holiday of Nazism. Now, that's no coincidence either. Okay? People will say, well, it's what? It's just coincidence that communism, Nazism, and Satanism all share the same high holiday of the year. No coincidence whatsoever, because all 3 of those things are one and the same. They are ultimately the same ideological belief system, whether anyone wants to accept that, realize it, grasp it conceptually or not. That is the truth, that these things are all one thing, and they're all operating for the same purpose, and that is to control humanity to the point where humanity is completely spiritually destroyed, to enslave it until it's spiritually destroyed. So this 40-day window, this 40-day time period from March 22nd through May 1st, and you can look on a calendar and count the days, it's 40 days total, is known as the occult season of sacrifice in their belief system, or simply the season of sacrifice, or the time of sacrifice. This is where the notion of Lent came from, okay? This is an old belief system that predates modern traditional Christianity. And it morphed into the period, the 40-day period before Easter Sunday, which is known as Lent, which is a time to sacrifice, to make a sacrifice of something that you like or that you want to do, okay? So to show restraint and self-control, and sacrifice to kind of pay respect and homage to the sacrifice that Jesus makes in the religion of Christianity for dying on the cross for the sins of humanity in their belief system. So that's where Lent came from, this older belief system called the season of sacrifice. And again, it is the first half of spring, because spring goes for about another 40 or so days. So we're talking about the beginning of spring to the midpoint of spring, okay? Right. And this is where you have to watch for, one, false flag events. Now, I won't go into what false flags are. I'm assuming your audience understands the concept of the false flag.
I think they would, yeah.
So you have to watch for false flag events, whether they are 100% staged, okay, and or hoax, or whether people actually died during them. In other words, problem, reaction, solution events, or as David Icke calls some of them, no problem, reaction, solution events. We're talking about things where the event doesn't actually happen, but it's just reported, or it's staged entirely. So we have to understand there's 2 types of false flag events. There are legitimate ones where people are actually harmed, and then there are ones where they only present the perception of a crisis and then obtain the reaction that they want so that they can go and implement the solution. So we're talking about problem, reaction, solution, or false flag events during this time period, and mass death events. And the people who are capable of causing these events, okay, want to do it in the most horrific way imaginable and in the way that maximizes the death, okay, because they're looking to make a huge impact of death and blood. This is what you have to understand about their belief, is that they believe that a certain amount of blood is required to be spilled. Enough people have to die. They want mass death events during this time period. And if you look back in human history, you're going to see tons of death events. These are not just random events during this time period. It would be way too much of a coincidence statistically for it to be just chance, random chance. These are planned events that are done during this time period according to this belief system. Now, here's what we had this season of sacrifice. We had the alleged chemical weapons attack by Assad on his own people in Syria. This is obviously a false flag event. Okay, that's the first sign that something is wrong and something, is being done in accordance with this belief system, is a false flag event where people are dying, okay? But you have to look at who's actually doing it. If we buy into the mainstream media's tale about the event, we're going to believe that it was done by Assad and his regime. We have to understand this was not done by them, if it's not a hoaxed event entirely, but I'm leaning toward the side that yes, people died during this, but it's not done by the people that were told it is done by the mainstream press. More likely than not, this is a false flag event done by CIA assets and British intelligence assets. Right. So we have to understand that this is done for the purpose of manufacturing consent. That's what a false flag, that's the purpose of a false flag ritual. Okay? The false flag ritual is done as an act of chaos magic. We're talking about influencing people's mind so that they support what the people in power want them to support. And the way they do that is they themselves, the intelligence agencies of the countries who want to send their military forces into a region to do something to control it or to seize resources in it, they themselves do an attack on the people and blame it on the leadership so that they can then manufacture the consent of the people to say, yes, send military force into that region to dethrone the current leader and take control in that region. And if you look at recent polls, I was just looking at a poll the other day, over 50% of the British people support the action that was taking place in Syria. Now, I don't know if even that bombing is still going on right now, but we'll get to that. But imagine that much support, that many people
still drinking that Kool-Aid,
still drinking the Kool-Aid, still buying into the mainstream media's utter lies. Yeah, and I would have no doubt in my mind that number is probably similar here in America, and that's a tragedy to me to know that this many people worldwide are still asleep to their methodology when we have their playbook in hand and have had it in hand for decades.
They're so predictable.
It's not the pattern.
It's not like we're not given the opportunity to understand what they do and the methods they play by. How many more of these is it going to take for the general public to get wise to it? I can just foresee this going on for decades or centuries.
Yes, it's unbelievable.
It really is.
It is like, I liken it to this. I actually said this to a friend the other day. Imagine if you were in a fight with another human being, an actual fist fight, okay? And you threw a jab, a right jab, 100 times in a row, mechanistically, with the same timing. I'm going to throw a jab, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. Over and over and over again, you threw the same right jab. Yeah. And every single time the jab connects and hurts your opponent. Would you feel the need to alter your battle plan? Would you feel the need to do something different if every time it's connecting and harming your opponent? This is how ridiculous
it's been done 100 times, so you allow it to be 101.
There you go. And that's what humanity is actually. That's how dumbed down humanity has become. That's not our nature. I don't think that that's our nature. I just think this is how dumb and complacent of a condition we have been worked into. This is what the education system is. This is what the poisoning of the food and water is. This is what the constant indoctrination through the mainstream media is. And when their brains get that beaten up, they cannot see truth. They cannot recognize the presence of truth in their midst. So, this is what this whole bombing of Syria was about. They manufactured the consent, then they go in and they have an opportunity now to cause even more mass death for this season of sacrifice ritual. That's what this whole thing was, folks. This was a season of sacrifice, occult, human sacrifice ritual. This wasn't just an alleged chemical weapons attack and then a response with weapons of war in Syria. This was a mass death ritual that was planned for this time of the year. Okay? Now, if you just look back in even recent human history, you look back during this time period, you're going to see a laundry list of events during this time period.
Got a few noted down. You've got the Waco, Texas showdown, the Oklahoma City bombing, Columbine High School massacre, all around the 20th of April.
That's right.
What else? Prince's death. I don't know if that was connected in some way, but Prince's death was announced on the 21st of April 2016, which just happened to be the 90th birthday of the Queen of England, born on the 21st of April 1926. There's a coincidence.
The Brussels bombing.
Right.
That happened during that time period. I mean, there's so many, you could go on and on. I mean, I don't have a list present, but I published a list myself years ago, and it's at least 30 different events only in the last decade or so that happened during this time period. So, the pattern is very historically clear, and it only takes some cursory research to look at the historical pattern of what has happened during this 40-day time period of the year. Especially, they love the days April 19th and 20th. Now, they may be finished because they may have accomplished, the amount of death that they want to accomplish with the Syrian bombing. Okay, but April 19th is a particular day that they love to inflict mass casualties on the world, and especially in the United States, and there's a reason for that. April 19th is the anniversary of the beginning shots of the American Revolution, the so-called shot heard round the world at Lexington Green in Massachusetts, which was the first shot fired in the American Revolution. And this is sort of payback, okay? This is payback for the people that dared to be free, that dared to declare that they're not slaves. Okay, that's why they love doing things on April 19th. And April 20th is another big day. That's a big astrotheological alignment day. Okay, that is the Helaic rising of Sirius, which they believe has very significant cosmic energies associated with it, and why they do sacrifices on that day. And April 20th happens to be Hitler's birthday, and they venerate Hitler being the puppet for their, entire, religion. Right. And they do this almost as like a celebration of his birthday.
You know what's also interesting about April 20th? It's 420, which is known as a Stoner's Day in America.
There you go.
Probably other countries where people celebrate burning up weed all day and just sitting around getting stoned. Right. That's got to be connected, right? There's got to be some symbolic relevance there.
I would say that they do it as almost like a mocking of the cannabis in general, because cannabis, while yes, people can use it for the wrong reason and just sit around and get stoned and not take real world action to create real world change for the better, but there is a positive side to it, where it is one of the most medicinal compounds on the planet if it is used correctly and if it is used wisely, especially when we're talking about the essential oil properties, the properties of the essential oils of the cannabis plant. And it has the power. It has the healing power to be able to actually cure just about every cancer on the face of the earth, and that's why it's being suppressed as a medicine, because they can't patent it and profit from it.
Sure. To
the extent that they would like. So I think maybe they do it on 420 just as a mocking ritual of cannabis in general, because they still have been successful, largely successful, in keeping the real medicinal properties of the cannabis plant out of human beings' hands for the most part.
They sure do love their mockery. They've got very dark, sick senses of humour, and the joke seems to be lost on anyone outside of their circle. Do you think the likes of Donald Trump and Theresa May, who I now call Treason May, understand the occult significance of what they're asked to do when they launch these attacks? Do you feel they're low-level operators that are just following orders, or do you think people like that are in the inner circle so they'd understand the full symbolic significance of these events?
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm going to probably take the position on the cautious side that these are probably not individuals who are, quote, in the know at that level.
Right.
They believe that they're, calling the shots for their country and that they are doing the right thing because they've been given this intel by these dark occult forces in the intelligence agencies, which is where we have to understand they are concentrated. They're not concentrated in the seen aspects of the government. They are concentrated in the intelligence agencies. This is where the modern dark occult operates. It has infiltrated the intelligence agencies of every country. That's where the highest level knowledge is kept. That's where all of the actual intelligence on everything that's going on in the world is kept within the intelligence agencies. And we have to understand that they are calling the shots from behind the scenes. This is the highest level of the military-industrial complex, and that's where the dark occultists have their claws firmly entrenched. And so I would say that these people are very highly manipulated, the politicians in the seen positions of so-called power. They're highly manipulated individuals, and I would say some of them may have a low-level affiliation with dark occult organizations, but I would venture to say that for the most part, they are manipulated individuals that are basically playing the role to the dark occult forces of useful idiots. Sure. And they're just going along because they believe that this is necessary and that a response is required because of the great evil that's just been perpetrated. Right. When they don't even understand that our intelligence agencies were responsible for the first event of mass death, and that was done, as I said, simply to manufacture consent for the second example of mass death that we just saw during the season of sacrifice. And again, they believe that the occultists who do this believe that they have to give the blood to the earth and the sun to ensure a bountiful harvest in the summer and fall period, or just before the fall, when the harvest takes place, so that we can survive the season of death. Because, see, in the ancient world, they only looked at the year as having 2 seasons. We look at, there's 4 seasons now. Okay, we have the 2 seasons that constituted the season of life. Okay, in the ancient world view of looking at things, and that was spring and summer. And the reason they looked at these 2 seasons as one in the ancient world is because that is the time of the year you can plant and grow food. Okay, so you could look at that approximate 6 months of the year as this is planting, growing, and harvesting season. Food grows in the northern hemisphere during this 6-month period. Then they looked at the seasons of fall and winter as the season of death. So they only had 2 seasons in their mental worldview. Okay, life and death, or in other words, the season where food grows in the northern hemisphere and the season where food does not grow in the northern hemisphere. So food sustains life. That's the season of life, spring and summer. The absence of food causes death. That's the season of death, fall and winter. Okay? So what their belief was at the beginning of the season of life, the beginning of spring through the midpoint of spring. In other words, the first quarter of the year. Okay? In the ancient world, you could look at the year starting with the season of life and then ending at the very end of the season of death and the beginning of the season of life again. Okay, so at the very beginning of this solar year, this zodiacal year, the beginning of spring to the midpoint of spring. Okay, that's it would be the first eighth of the year, that 1/8 of the year, okay, that you would make this sacrifice to the sun and to the earth, the two forces that come together to create life and to grow, to allow things to grow. Okay, you could look at that as father and mother. Okay, you would give this act of sacrifice through blood to the sun and the earth, and that would activate those forces to be able to infuse life into things so that they could grow for the season of life, and then at the beginning of the season of death, which is the harvest period, just prior to the beginning of the season of death in the fall, you would have enough food because there would be a good growing season to sustain life for all of the people through the entire season of death.
Right. In
the 6 months of the year that food does not grow. And people can say, well, that makes a little bit of sense, that people, understand the planting and the harvesting season of the year. I agree, that part of it makes sense, but the part that doesn't make sense to me, or that I don't believe, and that I don't think anybody should believe, is that process is going to require blood sacrifice of human beings. Right. This is an ancient, outdated, ridiculous religious concept that unfortunately still exists in the real world by people who still adhere to these ancient religious rituals, ceremonies, and beliefs. These are occultists who are still operating in the halls of power in the world, and we have to get out of the notion that this does not exist, that this does not affect us, and we have to realize this is a very real threat that we are facing, and these people are real, and they have their belief systems, and they stick rigidly to them, and they are carrying out this as the psychopaths that they are in the very real world that we have to live in with them.
In England, we've got a maypole dancing ritual which harks back to pagan traditions. And I can remember being made to take part in one of these as a young kid when I was growing up in the 1970s. It was actually part of the school curriculum for kids to indulge in May dancing around a pole, which is a fertility ritual. And
that's right.
It's like something straight out of the movie The Wicker Man. So I'm sure most kids taking part in it and the parents do not understand the full significance of it, but May dancing was still taking place as recently as the 1970s. It may well be still on now, but it certainly was in those times.
And, you just look at that. That's a fertility ritual. Again, it's boys and girls coming together, dancing around a phallic symbol, okay? This is the whole phallus and sperm symbology. And this is about, life, the season of life. Right. These are the things that ultimately, men and women have to come together to create life. You're coming out of the season of death into the season of life, and you're at the midpoint of the first half of the season of life, so the first quarter of that season. Then you celebrate the ending of that season of sacrifice period with life, a life ritual. You just went through the season of sacrifice, and those who have made it through are free to continue to express life, okay, because that's the end day of the season of sacrifice. So then this is a life and fertility symbol, because they look at it like we're celebrating that our sacrifice that we did during the first part of the season was successful, and now we have life again. See, this is how sick and depraved their belief system is, and they actually believe that these rituals have power and create success.
Maybe they should take a year off and see what happens. Take a year off, and you'll notice that the world still operates. And hey, guys, you don't need to be doing this shit every year. Yeah.
I mean, if you watch the movie Cabin in the Woods, I don't know if you've ever heard of this movie. It's an American horror film.
Yeah.
Cabin in the Woods. This movie actually portrays this belief in the movie that sacrifice has to be made of young people, okay? And the reason is because there are huge demonic type beings that operate within the earth, that if we don't sacrifice them will rise up and destroy us. And see, I believe that the people who made this movie knew about the dark occult belief system of the season of sacrifice, and they wanted to, even dramatize it further into a Hollywood production by making it about like these supernatural entities that are living deep within the earth that will rise up, from the catacombs of the earth and take over if we don't ritualistically sacrifice young people to them. And so I think maybe they were either involved at a low level in the occult, or they knew occultists, or they listened to people explain occultic belief systems regarding the season of sacrifice, and they encoded that into this movie, Cabin in the Woods. I think people should check it out. It's a pretty, decent allegory about the occult's ridiculous belief systems. And if you look at who really directs the entire ritual process, it's the intelligence agencies. So they understood a little bit, the makers of this film, and I think it's as far as a Hollywood horror film, it's sort of like a little B-movie-ish in that regard. But if you can get past that and pay attention to the allegory, I think people could get something useful from watching it.
Right. So there's so much significance around the date May 1st, as you'd said, and also the previous night going into the dawn of May 1st. So there's a celebration they have in the Netherlands called Queen's Day, which is celebrating the Queen's birthday in that country, and millions of people take to the streets in the big cities. I was there in Amsterdam in 1999, and it's just absolutely rammed with people, all wearing orange, the colour of the Dutch royalty. And you've got Hitler's death is said to have occurred on the 30th of April, going into the morning of the 1st of May. And I live close to Oxford in England, and there's this crazy tradition within Oxford University going back 300 or 400 years, where at dawn on the 1st of May, kids get up on one of the bridges, Magdalen Bridge in Oxford, and jump into the river, which is known as the Isis, by the way. It's the River Thames, but as it flows through Oxford, it's known as the Isis. And every year there's major casualties because half the students are completely pissed, and they just have accidents. Right. But also the water is very shallow, and they end up breaking their legs and stuff like that. But nevertheless, the tradition goes on every year. So all of this is ritualistic, and it's all connected to those dates.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, Hitler, his birthday was April 20th, and his death day was April 30th into May 1st. Right. And that's Walpurgisnacht, St. Walpurgis's night. Right. And again, the rituals that you're talking about with jumping into that river are, again, it's pain and death associated with it. And again, they continue to do it even though they know the risks associated with shallow water.
Yeah, and these kids don't know why they're doing it. It's just a tradition within the university, and they think, oh, well, if it's tradition, we've got to do it. Yep. But you could ask them, and they'd have no idea what the significance is.
Look at how many animal slaughtering rituals that we find around the entire globe that are completely even unknown to why they started, and yet people continue to do them just because they're told, well, this is the tradition, and this is just what we do on this day. Right. This whole cycle of doing things because you don't, just because you're told to do it, has to be broken. We don't need to continue to do these things that lead to death and suffering, and that involves letting go of a belief system. There's no reason for it. There's no logical reason for it. Why would you continue to do something you don't even know why it's being done? You don't know who started it, why they started it. There's so many examples of it. Exactly. So many people just use the excuse, well, this is just what other people have done, and that's not a good enough reason to continue to take a certain behavior. Right. I like the example David Icke used to give in some of his lectures. His sister or would cut the ends, the corners off of a roast and toss them away, even though it was perfectly fine food. And he would be like, "What are you doing that for?" And she was like, "Well, Mom used to do that." And they went to her and they said, well, why did you do that? And she said, I don't know. I never really thought about it. It's just, I always did that and because my mother showed me how to do that. And then they went to the grandmother and they asked her, why do you cut the corners off the roast before, you cook it and put it in the pan, and cook it. And she said, oh, I always used to do that because my pan was just too small to accommodate a whole roast. So there was a legitimate reason for that person to do it, but just because they did it, the people that they were teaching to cook just continued to do the same thing, but for no valid, logical reason,
right.
Just because they believe that's what you do. And that's how a lot of these rituals get started, and, they just get perpetuated year over year over year, and with people doing them and not even understanding why they do them.
That's
and
right.
I think that could even be true for the dark occult. They just feel like, well, this is absolutely necessary and required, and this is what we did in the past, and they just continue to do it now because that's what religion is. Religion is nonsensical thinking based on things that people believe that are not true, that don't have any real impact or significance in the world as far as having to do these things or having to accept or believe these things, but they just keep believing them and doing them just because they think that it is real, when in fact it is not actually real. It is just a belief system and a construct that exists only in the mind in an artificial sense. Right. And that's what I think humanity has to get over. I don't think we're ever going to evolve as a species until we get rid of the notion of religious thinking and start applying logic and reason to what we do.
Right. The other thing about 1st of May in England is it's a public holiday, or at least the Monday that is the closest to the 1st of May is given as a public holiday, May Day holiday. And right. I love the dark irony of the fact that we have a so-called leader named May at the moment.
Wow.
Treason May. So
yeah.
I'm sure they won't let that one go to waste. We did mention there some of these gun shooting events such as Columbine and many of the others that occurred around this time of year, and it seems a good opportunity to segue into the whole issue of gun control, because I know you've done presentations and lots of shows in the US about this, but we had the conversation when we were in Phoenix that British people really don't seem to be able to grasp the idea of the right to bear arms and what that's all about, because we've been a disarmed nation for as long as anyone can remember and beyond. And I think most people that you would ask about it in England would see Americans who keep loads of guns as just, gun-toting nuts that want trouble. So I wonder if you just want to go into the whole concept, the spiritual concept, really, of the right to bear arms and what that all involves.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief, but I want to prelude this by talking about false flag events again. We just had this Parkland shooting, and, I believe that people were actually killed and injured in this event, but we have to understand that it may not have gone down as the mainstream media portrays it, and we have to understand the elements of possible mind control involved on the part of the attackers. Through psychotropic drugs, and also the possibility that maybe they're not the only person who was doing the attack. A lot of times a tactical team will be sent in by an intelligence agency or a military branch, and they will carry out these mass deaths and then blame it on a lone gun-toting nut. That's how it happens most of the time. So we have to understand the event itself is a form of a false flag because, again, regardless of whether people are actually killed in problem, reaction, solution events, and again, in this instance in Parkland, I certainly would say people were killed, and there are people who will debate that, and disagree with that. However, they are doing it for the purpose of manufacturing consent, and the consent that they want to manufacture is that semi-automatic battle rifles, or what I simply call combat rifles, should be removed from the hands of the public. So the issue here is the public in America is now daring to say that the military and the police should have a grade of weapon that the people are not allowed to have access to. Okay, now, when you say that to people from Europe, usually it's like, yeah, so what's wrong with that? Okay, because they do not understand the one simple overarching concept that as soon as the police and military have weapons that are beyond the grade of weapons that the public possesses, the state that you have, the condition that you have in that country is called slavery. Let me just say that one more time for your listening audience. As soon as the police and the military, but especially the police, have a grade of weaponry and are allowed to keep and bear a grade of weaponry that the public is not allowed to keep and bear, meaning to own and to carry, you have a condition in that country, in that region of the world, called slavery. That is the very definition of slavery as far as I'm concerned. It is a power differential such that one group of people can tell the other group of people what they want them to do and how they want them to bend to their will. And the group of people who is being commanded or coerced has the ability truly to resist through physical means that coercion, that compulsion on the part of the people who are exercising their will against them. That's where the right to self-defense comes in. And again, the reason that people in Europe don't fully understand the right to self-defense is because they have no frame of reference to base it upon. They don't have a culture of self-defense. Their forefathers have given up that right on their behalf. See, that's how dangerous the situation is in Europe, that they didn't even agree and consent to give the right of self-defense up. People who came before them, long before their birth,
no opportunity,
consented to that. Right. So they are in such a state of a lack of reference and don't understand what it means to have a natural, inherent, and universal right to defend yourself with whatever weaponry you deem necessary to defend your life, your freedom, your rights, your property, etc. Okay? This is not the right to keep and bear arms or to own firearms and carry firearms is not an American right, ladies and gentlemen in the listening audience. Let me make that very, very clear. It is not an American right. It is a human right. It is an inherent human right. Everyone possesses this right, and the right is not granted. The right of self-defense through weaponry is not granted by human beings. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution does not give Americans this right. This right is given and owned because it exists naturally and inherently in creation. It is given by creation itself, you could say. Okay? We own this right as a birthright, all of us. You guys in Europe too, even though most of you don't know it and have never had the opportunity to exercise it. It is not an American right, and it is not given by the American Constitution or government. It is a natural right that exists inherently in creation. And what the Second Amendment does is it enshrines this right as something that the government shall never infringe upon because of how important it is. That's all those words do, the 27 words of the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It just says the government shall never make any laws that infringe upon this right, even though we have hundreds, if not thousands, of gun laws on the books that infringe upon this inherent human right. People have to start to understand you have the right to self-defense when you are accosted with violence from someone else who is trying to take your life, your well-being, your freedom, your rights, your property, etc. You have the right to defend yourself with physical force up to and including deadly force should the attack go on and continue, or should the state of duress continue. And you could do that with the weapon of your choice. See, the right of self-defense with weaponry does not just apply to firearms either. We have all these laws on the books about knives, and I know you guys do in your country too. There's a big anti-knife campaign literally going on in England. Okay, knives are included in the right to self-defense. We all have the right to keep and bear knives, not just firearms. How about nunchucks? How about a bow staff? How about a kali or a screama stick? How about brass knuckles? How about any type of edged weapon? You know, that's what we have to understand. A chain. Okay, arms. The word arms in the Second Amendment. The word firearms doesn't appear in the Second Amendment. You know, people don't even think about that. It's not the word firearms. Does it say to keep and bear firearms? No. It says to keep and bear arms. Arms means any weapon, anything that can be used as a self-defensive weapon. And again, we have to understand this is not about aggression, ladies and gentlemen. People hear people speaking on the right to self-defense, and they think aggression. This is how confused and brainwashed the public is. I am totally for the non-aggression principle. You know, I'm for the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. Don't aggress upon other people's life. Don't aggress upon their well-being. Don't aggress upon their rights. Don't aggress upon their freedom. Don't aggress upon their property. Okay? All rights are property rights. So if my body is my property, I have the right to defend it when it is under attack. Just as I would have the right to defend my rights when they are under attack, or my freedom when it is under attack, or my property when it is under attack. My body is my property. You're coming to harm my property or to take my rights. I maintain the self-defense principle right of defending what is my own property rightfully with the use of force, not with further aggression. See, if someone attacks someone without right, that's an act of aggression. You initiated coercive force. That's why it's a wrongdoing. You violated their rights. If they respond with physical force, that is not a further act of violence. The only act of violence took place during the initiation of that undue force that they didn't have the right to take. That's the act of violence. Responding to violence defensively is a right. It is not a second violation, because that person abdicated their right to remain unharmed by taking the initial coercive action to begin with. This is what we have to understand. There is such a thing as the initiation of coercion, which is a wrongdoing, which is a violation of someone's rights. Hence it is called violence, coming from the word violation. And then there is the rightful use of force in response to that scenario, in response to a situation like that, which is called the right of self-defense. So you have two principles at work. The non-aggression principle. Do not initiate violence against your fellow man or woman or animals. Okay, don't initiate violence against sentient beings. Period. Just don't start harm. Don't conduct harm upon others. It's not that difficult, folks. If there is no harm taking place actively right now, don't initiate harm. Don't begin the process of initiating harm toward another sentient being. Okay? And there won't be a problem. See? But we create the problem by initiating the harm and thinking that it's necessary. We'll get to that. And then, if harm is being conducted against you, you have a right to stop it. You have a right to end that situation by whatever amount of force is required to do it. And people can't get out in their mind that this is a natural human right that cannot be regulated or legislated by government or removed or abridged or infringed. This is a right that exists in nature. It has nothing to do with any man's law at all. And this is what I would really like to see the people of Europe understand much, much better, because they don't understand it, sadly. And that's largely because they haven't grown up in a frame of reference to understand it. Here in America, we definitely teach the right of self-defense. You know, maybe we're a slightly more abrasive people. You know, we're more rough around the edges. We may not be as refined as our European counterparts, okay, culturally. But you know what? We understand rights in many cases much better. And, as ignorant as Americans are, and I'll be the first to say that about my fellow countrymen, I've traveled across this country from one side to the other, Mark, and I'm telling you that people are so dumbed down that it's tragic. It's tragic how ignorant human beings are in this country. But I would still say it's the most conscious country on earth. And think about that. That's not saying much, okay? That's how dark I think about the state of humanity. That's how darkly. I think Americans are some of the most ignorant people in the world, and I still think the most consciousness on the planet is collectively in America. That means we're in a lot of trouble. Okay, but at least people here, to a large extent, understand the right of self-defense, and you don't see that right of the preservation of life and through self-defense understood in many other countries. Unfortunately, very few people in other countries understand this because they've had it systematically bred out of them, and that's very concerning to me. Because you are taking something that is natural and inborn in someone when they are a child, when they are first born, that we inherently understand this. If someone starts hitting you, you don't just sit there and take it. You have the right to make them stop doing it. But then we're told, oh, it doesn't matter who started it. It's wrong to hit back. It's wrong to defend yourself. No, it's wrong to start aggression against other people. That's what's wrong. When aggression is started against us, yeah, we can tell somebody to stop, but if they don't stop, we have the right to make them stop. Okay? And that's what people have to understand. I'm a spiritual individual. I believe in high-level spirituality through the golden rule / non-aggression principle. Okay? That's how I live my life. I don't start trouble with other people. I live my life. I want to be left alone, and I leave other people alone. But you know what? I'm no fool, and I'm no weakling. And if you come at me with violence and aggression, I'm not going to sit there and go, well, you should understand more about how you should treat people and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to respond. Okay? You haven't bred out the instinctual response in me to preserve my life and my property. That's never going to be bred out of me. I'm a different breed when it comes to that. And I understand that's my inherent birthright. No one can take that away, least of all government. Okay? And the thing that the Europeans and people in other countries have to really deeply understand is as soon as you give that right up, you already are enslaved. Okay? And now, let me tell you something. If the government decides at any given time that they are going to go completely hot tyrannical, what chance are the British people going to have? What chance are the French people going to have? What chance are the German people going to have? What chance are the Dutch going to have? You're going to have a lot of problems with that scenario. A lot more problems than we're going to have a lot of problems with that scenario here, but I'll tell you what, you're going to have it infinitely worse there. You know who might not do too bad? The Swiss. See? And there's a reason for that too, because that's where the Bank of International Settlements is at. So they have to arm their population. That's the most heavily armed population in Europe, pretty much. Because the masters have to have a good militia around them, But, here in America, they're going to have a very hard time instituting hot tyranny because of the amount of firearms concentrated in the hands of the American public. There's more firearms than there are people here, ladies and gentlemen. Believe me, there's more firearms than there are people in America. And that's exactly how it should be. That's how it should be if a people want to remain, to even have the modicum of freedom that they still do, which is little. It's the amount of freedom that we have is absolutely paltry compared to how free people should really be. Okay, we look at it, we can somewhat travel freely and choose the food that we want to eat and the people we want to interact with, and we look at that as freedom. But we don't look at like, oh, somebody is telling you that they're going to confiscate the better portion of the fruit of your labor, in many cases up to 50% of it. And we don't look at that as slavery, When one of the slaves held on the forced labor camps that they called plantations here in the American South, himself, Frederick Douglass, said, if 100% of the confiscation of the fruit of my labor it constitutes slavery, then at what percentage can you lower that it doesn't constitute slavery? What percentage can you say? If you say you must give me 100% of what you earn, well, that's slavery. Well, then, if I say you must give me 90% of what you earn, is that suddenly magically not slavery? If I lower that to 50%, is it then magically not slavery anymore? Because you're commanding that you must turn over the fruit of your labor to do what someone else wants to do with it? If you lower it to 25%, does that make it no longer slavery? No, the only number you could lower it to that doesn't make it slavery is 0. Because if you have a non-voluntary condition, you have slavery. As soon as someone is coercing someone at the threat of violence and saying you must or must not do what I tell you or I will conduct violence upon you, that already is slavery. And that's the definition of government. That's why this religion called government has to go. Because it's a belief system that doesn't reflect truth, that has nothing to do with what is real in the natural world, and is simply a belief system that constitutes slavery. And the reason that people are still in a state of slavery is because they have these belief systems called religions that are not true, that they will not let go. And the belief that the right of self-defense isn't real and isn't a right and shouldn't be exercised is a religion. So Europeans have a often religious view that is instilled in them by government and by the mass media, that somehow we don't possess this inherent human right. Everyone possesses this right. It doesn't matter what country you are from on the face of the earth. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter what your cultural beliefs are. This is an inherent human right, and it has to be protected. And you guys in Europe should start working on trying to take back this right. It's going to be very difficult. Once you lose a right, it's very difficult for those in power to cede that right back to the people. They want to take all that they can get, and they're going to rigidly trying to maintain all these laws on the book and put their order followers out on the street to enforce them, and they don't even understand that they've been enslaved, Another thing, just briefly to touch on, that I would just like to say about police and order followers regarding this is you ask people what they do this job for. You ask them what they do this job for. And they believe, just like the people in the season of sacrifice belief system believe, the occultists who believe that they have to give blood to the earth and the sun every year or something horrible will happen. They believe that without doing that practice of enforcing man's law, that there will be chaos on the earth. And I sit there and I think, what kind of a full-grown man would sit on a daily basis and worry about societal breakdown and chaos anywhere in the world, to the extent that you would say, let me go join a cult called the police that protects all these high-level elites and their pedophile belief systems and their ridiculous bloodshed-based belief systems like the season of sacrifice, and say, I think I have to do this, otherwise there'll be chaos. First of all, that's like a fearful little child inside. You have to have the mindset of a little tiny fearful child whose mommy and daddy isn't there to protect him, to say, I'm worried about chaos breaking out. I'm worried about societal breakdown. I have to go and forcibly control other human beings or there will be chaos. Like, what kind of a man thinks like that? I see, it's so foreign to my mindset because I don't have that level of fear. That level of fear is not instilled in me. You didn't break my soul or my spirit to such an extent where I sit there and I worry about the possibility of chaos and mass disorder. Couldn't give a shit. Couldn't care less about that kind of stuff. You know why? I'm a strong individual. That's why. I don't fear things like that. You know what's infinitely more fearful to me than any kind of societal breakdown that might happen between human beings? It's this little thing that you might want to be a little bit concerned about, ladies and gentlemen, and it's called slavery. You see? That's a much bigger concern to me, and that's much more chaotic than societal breakdown. Because slavery is the destruction of the human soul. That's what we should be concerned about. We should be concerned about whether we are free or not whether we are safe or not. I mean, who sits there all day worried about safety? You know who sits there worried about safety? A little insecure child sits and worries about their safety. A punk little child that has no emotional maturity and development as an adult human being. Yeah, and I'm directly attempting to insult people who think like that, in case you haven't gotten it yet. Okay? To worry about chaos and societal breakdown is the mentality of a fearful, undeveloped, non-emotionally developed child that has not reached emotional maturity as an adult. And that's what all these order followers are. They have parental abandonment issues psychologically. And this is what they think about and are concerned about because mommy wasn't there enough or because daddy wasn't there enough. And you know what? That's of no concern to me. This is of no concern to me. What is of concern to me is what is happening to our human rights. What is happening to our freedom as human beings? We are being enslaved by government. We are being enslaved by the military and the police. And the sickening death power that they have over the population through the weapons that we've allowed them to possess.
Right.
And then we want to believe that when they tell us we can't have defensive weapons against these absolute rotten psychopaths that are running the world, these demons, you give up that right, you're permanently finished. Once the right of self-defense is given up.
I think you made the case right there. That seems to be a good opportunity to segue into the next part because it does relate to natural law, particularly the non-aggression principle. And if we've not offended everyone by this point, then I'm sure we'll get a few more with the next segment, right? So
sure.
I did want to get
Let's go for it.
Right. Well, I did want to get you to talk about carnism, otherwise known as meat eating. It's another elephant in the room. It's something which is so blatantly obvious, but it's a subject area which most people choose not to address because it's very uncomfortable. And I know I'm asking you to go back over well-trodden ground because you covered this subject on your podcast series probably 4 or 5 years ago now. But, the subject is still current. Yes. The problems are still here, unfortunately, so it remains fair game to get into it. So, as anyone who studied your work on natural law will know, one of the key tenets is the non-aggression principle. Do not treat others in a way you would not wish to be treated yourself. The key point about this, it strikes me, is that the others part doesn't just relate to other humans, but to other sentient beings, so far as it's within your reasonable ability to do so. And maybe we can get into that last bit as we progress and some of the situations where that might crop up. But this seems to be something that so many people miss, that do no harm extends beyond just harm to other humans. And as we've established, this isn't a matter of personal opinion. Truth and natural law go beyond any one man or woman's personal opinion, so it doesn't care a hoot for who might like it or get upset by it or believe it or choose to accept it. It goes on being the truth either way. So
that's right.
Maybe you could just outline how carnism, as you refer to it, the eating of the dead flesh of animals, ties into natural law and goes against the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, and I want to preface this by saying that I have not really touched deeply upon this topic since I initially put this content out through my podcast series. And the reason I haven't is because it's such a hot button issue. and it creates such division within human beings that I almost want to just leave what I put out there for people who want to look into it and check it out for themselves, but not belabor the point to create more division between people, because there's already so much division between people. It's going to be very, very difficult for us to come together on the same page regarding natural law at all and human rights at all. So I've kind of just gone a little bit easier on this issue, but my belief regarding it hasn't changed at all. My understanding regarding it hasn't really changed. Carnism, of course, is the eating of animal flesh, okay? And we could extend it even to the use of animal products as foods for human beings, or even clothing, etc. Carnism is part of the taking of animal life, okay, and animal products for human use and consumption. And if you just think about the concept of property, of ownership, okay, and why things are wrongdoings, okay? So ownership is rightful possession, responsibility for its usage, okay? You maintain for it and care for it, etc. So my computer is my property. I own it lawfully, rightfully, because I didn't harm anybody to acquire this. I maintain it. I use it. I'm responsible for it. My stuff is on it. Okay? If someone were to just come and take it, that would be called theft. It's not their rightful property. All rights are property rights. So, what are some of the wrongdoings that someone can do against a human right or another sentient being? Well, there's only... See, people think, I could describe an infinite number of wrongdoings. Yeah, you probably could, as far as individual acts are concerned. But you could boil down all those acts to only a few forms of wrongdoing. And then if you really, really think about it at a philosophical level, there's only really one wrongdoing, that all of those other wrongdoings are simply a form of. So let me give you an example. Murder. People, you say, what's a really wrong thing that you could do to another human being? Murder, to take their life without just cause. Okay? To kill someone without just cause. That's called murder. Well, what did you do? You stole their life. It was an act of theft against their property, because someone else's life is their property.
Right.
Now, if you rape somebody, right, you are taking free will sexual association, and you're thieving their consent, their free will to sexually associate with whom they wish to. That's a wrong, and it's a form of theft. If you take someone's property, you're taking a physical thing that doesn't belong to you. That's theft. That's simple theft of property, of physical property. Okay? Coercion. You're also stealing when you coerce somebody, when you try to take their rights or their freedom, or make them do things that they don't want to do, or prevent them from doing things that they do want to do. This is coercion. Well, you're also thieving or taking something that doesn't belong to you when you exercise in coercion, and that's free will. You're thieving someone else's freedom of choice. Okay, so all wrongdoings that we could possibly do, murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, these are all forms of theft, because you ultimately have to take something that doesn't belong to you, that is rightfully owned by another, when you engage in theft. So when we apply this to not only the human kingdom but the animal kingdom, is the life of the animal that people take theirs to take? This is the only question that you really need to ask when it comes to this issue. Exactly. Was the animal's life your property to take, or was it their life? See, so in the question, there's the answer. Do we say, there's a cow, I'm going to take my life by killing that cow? Would we word a sentence like that? No, because it's not ours.
Right.
If you're going to go and kill that cow to eat it, you have taken the cow's life. You haven't taken
against its
something
will.
that belongs to you. Right. But I'm talking about the actual word, cows. That's the possessive of cow. Okay? Cow apostrophe S. You have taken the cow's life. Well, what does that in and of itself imply through simple language? Through the possessive, adding the possessive apostrophe S to the word cow. It means that the life belongs to the cow. It's its property. It's not your life. We word it as, well, Jim, we're going to go and kill this cow today on this farm, and the cow, that's your life, Jim. Well, you wouldn't apply the word "your" to the cow's life. I mean, I don't know how much simpler it could possibly get. You say it's the cow's life. Right there, you're acknowledging that it is not yours or mine. Okay?
Right.
So if it is their property and you are taking the property by killing the cow when you had no right to kill the cow, you are engaging in a form of theft, which is a wrongdoing.
I think it's that people do not equate the teachings of natural law with anything beyond human life.
Right.
Because when you look at most organized religions, they have at the very core of their doctrines an understanding of natural law principles before all the dogma and all the rules and regulations of the holy books were added. And I think a lot of people inherently understand that at the very core of themselves, that you should not initiate violence against another human, but they don't seem to grasp that it extends to other sentient beings. They don't seem to grasp that other life forms have these same rights.
That's correct. And that's because they don't apply the very simple foundational philosophical principle of ownership. So, and then many of them will make the erroneous assumption that this has to immediately be extended to the plant kingdom. And they'll say, well, plants are shown scientifically to feel, etc.
Yeah, I always get that one.
Plants aren't animals, okay? So, in other words, look, if we could physically survive on something other than plants, meaning like just light or air or water alone, then do it, okay? But having to sustain ourselves with some form of biological matter, the plant kingdom is the best choice because they are not the type of consciousness that animals or humans are. They are much more undifferentiated consciousness. And this has to do with the law of assimilation. There's a couple of laws in the natural world that have to be understood when talking about why carnism is wrong and a bad choice. The first is the law of assimilation. First of all, the more undifferentiated of matter that you take into yourself, which the human and animal kingdom are the most differentiated forms of matter, okay? Meaning that it's not a simple thing, okay? It's a complex system. When life becomes more and more complexified, okay, one, it becomes harder and harder to break it down. And two, it's achieving higher levels of consciousness as it becomes more complexified. So what we would do the best at eating, because it would be the easiest to break down energetically, would be something that is undifferentiated. Okay? So this is what the plant kingdom is. It's very simple. It's one thing. Your body has to release less energy and enzymes to break it down. When we take in animal life, we are actually taking the energy from the plants that the animals themselves took in. And where is all that energy coming from? It's ultimately coming from the sun. It's coming from the sun and the nutrients in the earth and the water of the earth. That's where all the energy is ultimately coming from. And plants store that energy effectively. They store it through the process of photosynthesis and through taking up of the nutrients through the soil system of the earth. And we are symbionts with that process. That's why a plant-based diet is going to maximize and optimize human health. And the people who say, no, that isn't true, haven't done it correctly. They have failed at doing that properly,
Right.
And think that it isn't possible for others.
Right.
And the law of assimilation means that you take in the most undifferentiated matter, and that's going to be optimized the most as far as the breakdown required to process it with the breakdown of energy, using energy to break down the food. If you were to eat an animal, you have to do harder work at breaking that down. But look at the animals we eat, largely sustain themselves on plants, herbivores like cows, okay? If we were to try to eat a carnivorous animal, it would be much more difficult to break it down, okay, because it's a more complexified life form that eats the herbivorous animals in many cases, okay? And again, people will go, well, why doesn't natural law apply to the animal kingdom? Once again, natural law, the laws of morality, apply to those who have the ability to understand those laws,
Right.
who have a holistic, who have the capacity for holistic intelligence. Meaning, do you have the capacity to understand the moral difference between right behavior and wrong behavior? A lion does not have the ability to sit there and philosophize about the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. It is an instinctual creature. Okay? Therefore, it has a less complexified brain and central nervous system than a human being. That's why we are held to a higher standard by creation's laws than a lion is, okay? Or a snake,
Right.
etc.
Right.
Okay? The moral laws of creation don't apply to the animal kingdom, but we may be still a member of the animal kingdom, but we are a separate subset of the animal kingdom. Human beings are much more complexified animals, and therefore we've crossed that dividing line, we've crossed that barrier from being a less complexified creature with a less complexified brain and central nervous system that cannot comprehend the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior into a more complexified creature with a more complexified brain and central nervous system that can comprehend the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior, and therefore the laws of nature regarding morality and behavioral choice apply to human beings. In other words, natural law applies to human beings, where it does not apply to the animal kingdom.
I wanted to jump in there and say that I'm actually going to disable the comments on the YouTube version of this show because I know what's going to come and I just can't be bothered to go through them all again. I can't be asked to hear all the same old arguments.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Right,
let me tell you why.
We know what's coming.
Blame you. Yeah, it's not just that. It's often people speak without really knowing what they talk about and only talk from opinion, okay? And your forum on YouTube, your place to post your video content or audio content,
Right.
is not someone else's forum to express their often erroneous ideas. If they are free to do that, right? They're free to do that. This is why I disable comments on my YouTube videos. You come to my, see, here's the word, right? Possessive, my YouTube channel,
Right.
for the information I wish to present there.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't, I am not using it as a forum for someone else's ideas. It's a forum for my ideas.
Right.
Okay?
And their channel is their opportunity to put forward their views.
They have the same opportunity to go and put whatever they want to put out into the world. That's called freedom of speech.
Right.
Okay? But don't tell me I'm censoring someone because I don't want inane, ridiculous, untrue, unthought out, non-philosophical, emotionally based, retarded ideas often on my YouTube comments that are going to completely detract from the message I'm trying to explain to someone.
Right.
Okay? They have the freedom of speech to say all those ridiculous, nonsensical, inane ideas and go and post it somewhere else on the internet. You are free to do that.
Right.
Okay? But I totally support and agree with your decision, and it is not censorship, ladies and gentlemen. Censorship means that I'm trying to silence your voice. Okay? I'm just telling you you're not allowed to spout nonsense where I am trying to present a well-thought-out, true philosophical idea.
Right.
Then you can go take that and do that somewhere else.
Well,
You're
ordinarily
free to do that, but not on my forum.
Right.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, I don't disable comments on my channel, but for this show, I'm going to because, like I said, I know what's coming. I'm going to get things like, well, animals all eat each other as part of the food chain, so it's okay for us too. We've already addressed that one.
That's the Darwinistic order idea, the Darwinian natural order,
right.
Which they think is natural law. Because they think that's in the natural world, right? It's in the physical natural world that's done. So therefore that means natural law applies to that. That means you don't understand what the words natural law mean. Natural law is about morality. It has nothing to do with one animal eating another. It has nothing to do with Darwin's ridiculous theories of macrobiological evolution.
Yep.
Okay? Has nothing whatsoever to do with the so-called natural order, the survival of the fittest. Nothing whatsoever. This is about morality. It's about doing the right thing. It's about making the right choice with your free will, not to harm others.
Right.
You don't have the right to perform that harm upon them.
Right. So I'm going to get plants have feelings too, so therefore there's no difference between eating plants and animals, so I may as well go on eating animals. Yeah. I'm going to get humans are omnivores and our digestive system is designed to cope with a wide variety of food, including meat. I'm going to get our teeth were made for ripping at meat. I'm going to get this one, which always crops up in these threads. I don't like slaughterhouses, but it's okay if the animal's been grass-fed, raised in open ground, and looked after, and is killed humanely. Then it's okay. Yeah. Well, guess what? The animal still died.
You know what all of these things are?
Excuses.
They are excuses, but they're beyond that. Every single thing that you said there constitutes one thing. Religion. Religion. See, people have all these religious beliefs, but don't think of them as religion because they never go deep into the psychology and the underlying philosophy and break it all down to one thing. Is that yours to take? Right. That's the only question you have to ask to know whether it's right. Do you have the right to take that? Is that rightfully yours? See, I've worded this, Mark, as the whole spiritual construct of what the earth is and what all the people are doing here. Want to know what it all is? We're in a massive prison. And the prison is for one particular type of criminal. And you want to know what that type of criminal is?
Go ahead.
Thieves. The entire earth is a construct that is a prison for thieves to reform and to recognize that they should not steal.
Wow.
Because that's what natural law is. Natural law can be... See, people say, I don't want to watch a 9-hour seminar, right? My 9-hour natural law seminar website and YouTube channel was broken down from 20 years of research and study. I think I did pretty well putting 20 years of research and study into 9 hours.
Right.
Okay? That's too long for people to watch. So then you explain to them, natural law is about not doing these harmful behaviors. Murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, lying. Okay? Just don't do those things. You don't want those done to you, so don't do them to others. And that seems to be even too complex for people. They can't even philosophize through that. All you have to understand is 2 words, folks. 2 words. All wrongdoing can be summed up by theft. So therefore, all of natural law is about 2 words. Don't steal. That's it. Just don't take that which does not belong to you. Don't steal. All you have to ask, does the life of this being belong to you to take? And the answer is no. If you're a reasonable, logical, truthful human being, and you're not a psychopath or a religiously diseased imbecile, okay, who actually twists the words of the Bible, even though it says no such thing, and the thinking man has dominion over all life on earth, which would make him God, okay, not the actual God of creation, God, but religious thinkers actually believe that somehow, God gave us dominion over all the animals and also made us authorities over other human beings too, through this thing called government. They actually believe that,
Right.
It's all religion. You have to have a religious belief system because that's what carnism is. Carnism is another form of a religion.
Talking of religion, when it comes to the meat industry, we have the halal practice, of course, which, to my mind, is just a way of making the animal suffer even more than it would have done. And yet this is held up as a great and noble thing by, certain religions. The meat industry judges its success by how many more millions of animals it slaughtered this year than it did last year. It's similar to the way our insane economy operates. Companies need to make more money this year than they did last year, which is what drives up inflation and, financial problems for everyone. You got the cancer industry. They judge their success by how many more patients they're treating this year than last year, not by how many they cure. And this seems to fit in very well with the satanic ideology of the dark occultists. So they love pain, misery and suffering, and the more of it that gets fed into the morphic field in which we all live, the better. So nothing better for them than to have billions of animals dying in horrific, brutal circumstances and have all that fear-based energy fed into the morphic field.
That's exactly it. Exactly. And so that brings it full circle, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And you have people saying that veganism is a tenet of Satanism, as if the control system is trying to get us all to go vegan. Well, how would that suit their belief system? I was
involved in Satanism, Mark, and I'm telling you, they're some of the biggest meat eaters you would ever see in your life. They have no problem. They're not vegan at all, and they have no problem putting down as much meat as they possibly can into their systems.
Which is
it's
what
a
I would
very
expect.
meat-driven diet in Satanism.
Right.
And like you said, that's because they want this continual sacrifice, blood sacrifice to the earth and the sun. They are a solar cult that believes in continuous sacrifice of animals and human beings. And they sacrifice human beings largely during this 40-day period now, although they'll take the opportunity to do it whenever. But they sacrifice animals continuously. The earth is acting as one big altar of sacrifice. We are constantly spilling blood onto the earth through the murder of animals, through taking their life without right to do so, because we believe it's normal, natural, and necessary, and it's none of those things. It's not normal. It isn't part of the true natural process on the earth, and it's not necessary because every human being can sustain themselves from what the earth grows. We do not need to take animal life to sustain ours.
In the countries that we live, we have alternatives available to us. If you were living at the North Pole and you didn't have access to supermarkets and your only way of staying alive would be to kill other creatures, that would be a different matter. But we're not talking about that in Britain or America or most countries in the world where there are alternatives available. So it becomes a choice, a conscious choice. You run out of excuses. Now it's down to you and your free will choice.
And people bring up that argument to me all the time. Well, what about in extreme climates where it's too cold?
Yeah.
What makes you believe that human beings are intended to live in those climates? That's not a natural environment for human beings to live in. We are supposed to live where the food grows, ladies and gentlemen, and not to navigate into the most harsh and extreme climates of the world where the food doesn't grow. See, the idea is what makes you believe human beings should stay in the areas where the food doesn't grow and not physically migrate to the areas where it does grow. That's the natural process. Okay? What's unnatural is insisting food doesn't grow here, but yet I'm going to stay here.
Right.
That's what's unnatural.
another couple of scenarios that people raise are, supposing you were out in the wilderness and, you'd had a plane crash or something and your only way of surviving was going to be to kill some animals.
Right.
Then does that become morally acceptable? And then another one is, supposing you're out in the woods and a bear comes to attack you and you have a gun on you, are you going to kill that bear?
Of course. Both of those situations are survival-based situations. Given the choice between me surviving and being able to propagate an understanding of morality versus having to kill an animal so that I can survive, I'm going to take the opportunity that I'm afforded and sustain my life without any doubt. Right. I'm going to be honest about it. Right. The moral principle will be delayed in that instance so that I can survive. Look at a situation of a plane crash. If there were plenty of plants around and people survived the plane crash, do you think they'd try to eat the plants? Yeah. And then if there were some small animals around that they could hunt, do you think that they would go to that next if there were no plants? Yeah. But what if there were no plants and no animals, and you see certain survival situations come up like that? Sometimes people die and they will actually sustain themselves off the human.
Right.
But that's the most harsh and damaging thing to the body that you could possibly put into your body would be human flesh, because that's the most complexified form on the planet that you could consume. This is why you have these sick, twisted occultists who are eating human flesh in many cases, and they develop these diseases like Kuru. People should look that up and recognize some of the so-called elite class already are infected with Kuru, which is a neurodegenerative disease caused by eating human flesh. We look at some of the behavioral things that go on with some people in politics and finance, and we look at some of their motions of their body. You look deeper into it and you realize these people have Kuru. Look it up. You'll be horrified by it, but you'll also recognize this is actually taking place and going on in the world.
Right.
I think that brings it back full circle, Mark, because what we're really talking about is the season of sacrifice that's taking place all year long, and that's the ritual slaughter of animals on this planet in the
that's right.
Hundreds of billions.
Well, it has come
year.
full circle, yeah, and all these parts have been very connected, I would say. We're almost done, but I just wanted to throw in a comment that was made by a good friend of mine, Nathan Redette, in a separate podcast. He pointed out that slaughterhouses are often placed on key ley line vortexes, so that fear-based energy that we were talking about, that negative energy, can be amplified out into the wider energy grid. And he made the point that the United Nations headquarters in New York is situated on the site of a former slaughterhouse, which tells you a lot. And he actually created a map where he'd placed the sites of abattoirs over key ley line spots, and you can definitely see there's something there.
Without a doubt. The occultists who are running this world know about the energy grid system of the Earth. They know where these key fundamental points are. They know that it carries subtle and often beyond subtle energies to the people. And they are trying to infuse into the grid system, the ley line grid system, the most negative and fear-based penetrating energies to carry that out to the four corners of the earth.
Right.
And they want that energy in the people. They want the fear and pain-based energy that happens with the slaughter of animals infused into human beings to make them fearful and to make them reactive, such as just animals who are, don't have the higher level thought functions that we as human beings should have and should develop and work upon. Sure. They want us being purely instinctual creatures that act on instinct alone and always react the same way and can't see patterns and, aren't using the gift of free will and holistic intelligence that creation has given us in the ways that we should. And that's why they want all that negative energy infused into the whole energetic system of the earth. And that's what animal sacrifice and slaughterhouses are most certainly all part of.
Sure. All right, well, I think we're about done, so I certainly appreciate you coming on today and spending time to go over these well-worn points in many cases.
Mark, thank you so much, and really great topics to talk about and great questions, and I commend you for doing the work that you're doing, and keep it up. You're doing a great job, and I want to thank you for having me on today, for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you. We did have a good chat today. So I'm guessing that you have made the decision to continue with your work, because there was some doubt about whether you would continue to put that out publicly. Do you want to let people know what's on the way for you, and just a reminder of where they can find your existing work?
Sure. I found enough help to continue, because it was questionable whether I was going to be able to continue doing this by myself, which I've been doing it largely by myself. There have been, of course, people behind the scenes who have helped with certain things, but with What on Earth is Happening, particular, my main website, whatonearthishappening.com, I've largely done it myself up to this point. All the podcasts, the whole website, all the graphics, everything. So I was looking for some basic help with graphics, video, web development, programming, things like that, and I've gotten it to a limited extent, to the point where I think it's going to be enough to continue, and I'm going to keep putting work out into the world to try to change it for the better and end slavery. So people can check out all of my work at whatonearthishappening.com, and I always tell people the best place to start is with the podcasts, and start at number 1, go all the way back to number 1, and work your way forward in order. And you could check out my videos that are up there. You could check out my interviews. But the podcast section is the real journey that is set up as an initiation of sorts. It's a stepwise progression, and you could really open up your worldview to a wider understanding if you follow that in order at your own pace. So once again, whatonearthishappening.com, and check it out. There's a huge body of knowledge up there for free for you to explore. And Mark, I want to thank you so much again.
Yep, no worries, man. Thanks for coming on.
This is just for fun.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations.